Hey there. Have you ever had one of those days or maybe weeks where you just feel completely stuck? Like you're spinning your wheels, but you're not actually going anywhere? Well, today we're going to dive into a really powerful framework that's designed to break that exact cycle and get you moving again. It all comes from a super insightful coaching conversation. And the core idea? It's actually surprisingly simple.
Let's just start right here, because I think every single one of us has felt this. You're trying to get better at something, so you're reading all the books, listening to all the advice, and then suddenly you're just overloaded. All that learning somehow leads to doing nothing, and you find yourself frozen at a total standstill. And it just becomes this incredibly frustrating loop, doesn't it? You know exactly what you don't want. You don't want the stress, you don't want the bad habits, you don't want this feeling of being stuck. But here's the trap. Focusing only on the negative just keeps you right there with no clear way to move forward. So what if there was a simple, memorable way to just snap out of that? A little framework you could use to shift from feeling completely overwhelmed to feeling empowered and actually in control. Well, that is exactly what we're going to unpack. And here it is. It's called the ACT protocol. It's just a simple three-part framework, and it's designed to be a super easy to remember tool to get you unstuck and moving forward again. Acknowledge, choose, and take a step. I mean, it looks almost too simple, right? But don't let that fool you for a second. Each of these words is a critical part of a sequence that can create real, lasting change. So let's break down exactly how this thing works. Okay, so the very first step is acknowledge. And this one is deceptively simple. It's all about just acknowledging where you are right in this moment. Not judging it, not creating some big story around it, but just seeing it for what it is. And to help us do that, there's this fantastic little tool from mindfulness expert John Kabat-Zinn called S.T.O.P. First, you just stop. Literally pause everything. Then T, take a breath, a real deep, mindful breath to kind of ground yourself. Next is O, observe what's happening. And this is key, without judgment. And only then can you P, proceed, not by just reacting, but by actually responding with some intention. And let's be real. That O for observe, that's the hardest part for most of us, isn't it? We're so quick to judge ourselves for feeling overwhelmed or feeling stuck, but the goal here is to just notice it. That simple act of non-judgmental observation, it creates this crucial little gap between the feeling and your reaction to it, and that gives you the mental space you need to move on. So, once you've acknowledged your situation without that layer of judgment, something really amazing happens. You get something incredible back. The power of choice. You're no longer just reacting. You get to respond. So let's look at step 2. Choose. Most of us live our lives on the left side of this slide, stuck in that don't want loop. But that's kind of like trying to drive a car by only looking in the rearview mirror. The really powerful shift happens when you pause and you consciously ask yourself, okay, that's what I don't want, but what do I actually want instead? Now, here is a really cool little mental trick to help you make that choice. Take the problem, that feeling of being stuck, and imagine you're projecting it onto a giant movie screen. Just see it playing out there as something separate from you. So what does this simple little mind game do? It creates distance. It pulls your emotions out of the driver's seat for a minute, and it lets you look at the situation objectively. And all of a sudden, you can start to see your options with a totally new, much clearer perspective. And that newfound clarity leads you directly to the final piece of the protocol, taking a step. This is where it all becomes real. This is the moment where that mindset actually transforms into momentum. And here is the absolute key insight. The mind often follows where the body leads. Your step does not have to be some giant leap. Seriously, it can be a tiny little action, sending one email, doing one push-up, writing one single sentence. So why does this work so well? Because that small physical action sends a powerful signal to your brain that the paralysis is over. The goal is not to solve the whole problem at once. It's just to break the inertia and prove to yourself that you can move. Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this ACT protocol actually work when, things really go wrong? Let's look at a real-world example of it in practice, right in the middle of a high-stress moment of total chaos. So during the live online summit where this whole framework was being shared, the host Ryan suddenly had everything just shut down, a complete technical failure. But instead of spiraling, he instinctively used these principles. He acknowledged the problem. He chose to focus on the one thing he could control, restarting, And then he took the step to power everything down and get back online. And guess what? The show went on. And what this really shows us is that in a moment of total chaos, you don't need 100 different solutions. You just need one. One clear choice and one simple action to move forward. That is what creates momentum out of a complete and total standstill. So, what's the big idea here? What's the main takeaway from all of this? Well, it's about fundamentally reframing how we look at our challenges, and maybe even more importantly, our mistakes. I want you to think about your life like a movie that's being made. Do you really think they get the perfect scene on the very first try? Of course not. There are dozens, sometimes hundreds of takes. Your mistakes, they aren't failures, they're just takes. They are practice runs before you create your final masterpiece. And that leads to probably the most empowering idea of all. You are the director of your own story. If you are stuck in a scene that you don't like, you have the power to yell cut and start a new one. You always, always have the power to rewrite your own narrative. So I'll just leave you with that question to think about. Knowing that you can acknowledge where you are and choose where you want to go, what is the one small take that you are going to direct for yourself today?